started. So I can't go to the next slide. Hold on. Okay, perfect. So I wanted to talk about essential non-design skills. So things that I think designers should know that have been useful for me outside of university. And I picked 5 topics to go over. So I figured we could do a little bit of an introduction. And then after that, the 5 topics I picked out are communication, networking, personal branding, job hunting, and self value. So, all things non design related that I think um, should be a little bit useful for anyone. And I'm just going to go over each one at a time. They'll have their bullet points, but they're really broad topics. And they kind of vary based on the person that you are, the situation that you're in. So I wanted to use them more as to open up a discussion. And then if you have questions that are maybe more specific to your situation, like networking might be different depending on the industry you're a part of. But I want people to come out of this feeling like these all fit to their own situation, right? So we'll go through the background first really quick. So this is kind of my timeline of what's been going on in my life. So I went to Sac State, finished the program in 2020, I think. And after that, I got my first job at a company called Paper Crown. So this was a esports and gaming freelance agency. So I was able to work on some really cool projects with some clients that are like one-off projects. And I have some experience. My first esports organization was a company called 100 Thieves. And this was working with an individual brand. So I wasn't doing freelance anymore. I was just working, building a single company. And now I work with a company called The Guard. So I've been there for about 2 months. They're owned by the LA Rams. So that's the NFL team's esports organization that they bought out. So that's where I'm working now. I have a little bit of going into each one. So Sac State, I was president of Grids with my co-president L, and had a lot of fun taking part. I know things are really different now, but obviously everything was in person when I was there. But I had a lot of fun with Grids, a lot of fun with the program. I said this last time I was here, but if I could, I definitely would not go back to do the program. I'm very happy to be out of it. Although I did learn a lot, but Grids was super fun, and it was definitely my favorite part of being in the program. So I'm happy to be back for this, not for the classes. Um, this was the first job that I had, Paper Crown. So esports and gaming freelance agency. The year that I started working there, we were awarded 2020 Creative Team of the Year by the Esports Awards. So that was really big accomplishment. We got to fly out to Texas to do a little awards ceremony. This is probably going to load really slow, but this is some of the work that I was able to do. So we did things for individual clients. So Riot, Valorant, we did some peripheral companies like Astro, and I was able to work on individual content creators, doing motion graphics and some identity stuff. And obviously we were able to do stuff for organizations as well. So beyond that, my next job was at 100 Thieves. So this one was really fun. Instead of doing freelance, like I said, I was working just building up a single brand. And this was a really great experience practicing, just developing an identity. And this is kind of how I found out that this is what I like doing. Instead of freelance, I preferred doing this because I was able to build one brand and just keep adding more and more to it and evolving it over time. And I really enjoyed doing that work. So it was nice getting some experience doing single organization and then freelance. I know a lot of people lean towards freelance when they start out, but I think it's definitely worth trying working for a company and getting experience doing both. When I was an amateur designer, I really liked the idea of being my own boss, but then I realized how difficult freelance was, and I much rather prefer doing this now. So that ends up leading into my next job where I'm at now. Like I said, I haven't been here for very long, but it's a very new organization. They started last year, and I'm able to work on a lot bigger projects. So at 100 Thieves, I was a junior designer. Now I'm a regular designer looking to get a senior design position. So I'm doing a lot of work that um, a senior designer would do. Um, Instead of just doing smaller projects, I can work on like whole identities for like this was a esports team, like a branch of our esports that we announced. So I was able to do the whole identity for that. And that has been super fun. But like I said, I haven't been doing it for very long. So we'll see what happens. But other than that, that's a little background on me. And I wanted to talk about these 5 topics. So we're going to start with communication. I think this might be the most valuable out of the 5. So I wanted to start off with it as a skill. So I've found in my experience, the 4 things that were the most helpful for me for communication is confidence, clarity, context, and being able to critique. So definitely the 4 most useful aspects of communication outside of university. And the way I wanted to do this, I'm just going to go through each one at a time. I have bullet points for each one. So, starting with confidence, I think is the most important tool for a designer outside of design itself. You see like a lot of minimalist designs by organizations and companies being used that are really simple and really effective. And I know a lot of amateur designers will have minimalist designs that do the same thing, but they're not able to pitch it right and they're not able to pitch it with confidence. Um, so being able to be confident for your design work is going to be really important to getting the work approved and not backtracking as much. And if you're like me, I didn't start out very confident as a designer, so I had to compensate for that. Like I came into the program very unsure of a lot of the design decisions I was making, and the way that I solve for those is doing more preparation and research. So you guys know if you're in the program how important it is to do research. It's like 90% of the design process, which you don't really when you start out as a designer, you don't realize how much goes into that. But all of that um, helps prepare you for when you do your pitch, because the biggest thing that people have issues with their clients, especially when they do freelance, is there's always a lot of backtracking when you start out because they want things a certain way, you have things done a certain way. But what you do to have your decisions be more confident is you prepare in advance. So you have that research to back you up. If the client doesn't like the way that you do something, you're able to support yourself and it's able to make you feel more confident with the decisions you're making. And all of this goes to making the client feel safe. So your biggest goal should be to make the client trust you and the decisions that you're making so that you don't backtrack as much. So when you do um, all of this research in advance, you want the client to just say like, all right, sounds good. You sound like you know what you're doing. So I'm just gonna like sit back, let you do your job. That's kind of the ideal client situation you want to have. So all of that's due to confidence, clarity, being efficient, unwavering. So you don't switch your mind very often. You're very straightforward. Is really important to building that confidence and that trust with your client. So if there's a simpler way for you to portray information, then you do that. I find a lot of designers when they start out, they feel like they need to convince the client. But what you want to do less of convincing is you just want to like show them the work, right? Or show them the proof. Um, it's not your job to convince them. It's your job to just show them, hey, this is the research, so this is the right answer. And you don't want to convince them with your opinions. You want to use the research that you have to back up your decision. So being really direct with all the work that you do and not fluffing up your projects or your pitches. Um, Context, probably the most important thing overall for a designer is realizing context. So there isn't such a thing as a bad design if the context makes sense. And the best way that I would describe it is logo design. Context is the only thing that matters, right? So when you look at logo design for like a kids TV show, the reason why that works is because the context of that situation is it makes sense for the audience, right? So the SpongeBob logo is considered a good logo in the context, but if it was swapped in the context of Apple, which is a product company, they sell tech, it's suddenly a bad logo, right? So understanding the context is more important than the design itself, because if it makes sense for that audience, then you can get away with using like Comic Sans. I know people like to like trash on Comic Sans, but it's because it doesn't get used in the right context. It's not like it's a bad typeface, right? Um, so context is going to be really important, understanding those situations. And like I said, all of that goes back to your research and your audience, right? Critiquing, really important for communication. The reason why you guys do it so much in the program and in university is because it's super useful to have proper critique skills outside of the program, because it's going to give you better teamwork. If you work with an organization, you'll be able to work through problems with others a lot easier. And if you decide to do freelance by yourself, critiquing is going to be your way to support yourself in getting the client to buy your decisions, right? So some tips for critiques that I'm sure you guys know already, but generally you want to stick to facts over opinions. The biggest example that I give in this situation is like a client saying that like I like this color. So like I like the color blue for this logo. I don't think we should use orange. I think blue works better, right? And your goal is to not just side with the client and say like, okay, if the client wanted this color, so I'm just going to change it. I don't think it's going to look better, but I'll just do what they want, right? Um, I always encourage people to push back on the facts that you have in front of you. So if the client says, I want it to be blue instead of orange, you say, okay, well, let's take a look at our audience that we listed out, the research that we've done. Here's what we know about the users for this. So based on this information that we have in front of us, does that make sense to change it to this color, right? In a lot of situations, it does end up making sense. So I've had instances where clients uh, actually end up being right, because in a lot of cases, the client knows more about their audience than we do. So if you have that conversation, you can pull that information from the client and you know, like, okay, I'm changing this color because we looked it over and we decided that this makes the most sense. You're not just siding with what they have to say, right? Then a couple more things: avoiding I like or I don't like for critiques. I prefer when we do a critique to say I think this works because, or I think this doesn't work because. Um, the same situation where you want to avoid opinions saying like, oh, I like this color, I like how this looks. I instead you say I think this color works because of this situation with like what we know, right? Um, and then last point, not forcing feedback. In school, you sometimes have to give critiques. I don't know if it's the same way, but we would like have to do like minimum 2 critiques, right? But that can put people in the wrong direction very often. So I just encourage people that you do not need to force feedback. There are a lot of times where if I don't have something, maybe I just don't have it in the moment, or maybe there's nothing to critique at all. You just say that you don't have anything. It saves people a lot of stress and a lot of trouble, right? So other than that, that's some advice on communication. Like I said, they're kind of broad topics. So if you want me to go back and if you have any questions at the end of this that are specific to your situation, we'll go over that afterwards. But moving into networking. So this one's a little bit more straightforward. The advice I have on networking is based on community and then 2 different methods that I know have worked. This, like I've been saying, is specific to me. So in esports and gaming, this is what I found worked for me in networking. But if you want to work in a different industry, it could be different. And I can answer any questions after that tie those two together. But for networking in esports, the way the community works is that there are 5 layers, and there's kind of like a core in the middle, starting with people that are unaware of esports, people that are aware of it, people that engage in esports. So maybe they watch a lot of competition or they compete themselves and they're active in like the sport itself. There's people that engage in the community, and then there's people that lead the community. And a lot of the times when people start networking, they get stuck on like the third part where they're really interested in working in esports. They're like super invested in gaming, but they haven't gotten involved with the community yet. So I'll have people reach out to me like, how do I get a job here? And I'll ask them like who they know, who have you been talking to, who have you reached out to? And they're like, I don't really know. I just like the organization, like I really like the industry itself is super fun. And like I grew up on some of these games, but I haven't spoken to anyone yet. And I think a reason why things like LinkedIn are really helpful, and then for me, Twitter, is the way you engage with the community is you focus less on the organization and more of like the staff. So I'll have people who, when I worked at 100 Thieves, they'll reach out to like the CEO on how they can get a job and how they can start working for this company. And they don't understand, or they haven't put any research on like any of the staff that works there. But most of the networking that you can do is involved with people that work behind the scenes. So you put in a little bit of research on who works in marketing, who leads marketing, or who's like regular junior, senior designer, and you get to know them instead of the management or higher ups of the company, right? Um, but that's how the layers work in esports. Like I said, it could be different. And the way that I found the 2 different methods to kind of work through that is the growth method. So this is what I did. I've been working in esports for about 11 years now. So this is a long-term investment. The way it works is you start off new. If you don't have a lot of experience in the industry, you start off with your friends, with people you have met recently that are also new. Maybe they're still learning. And let's say you've met someone in esports who just started same time as you, and you just have that mutual connection that you're both beginners, right? And you start from there. You don't have to think about value or like how you can like make this connection with this person. You're just kind of having fun. So when I started in gaming, this wasn't a profitable industry, so nobody was making money, and we didn't really think of like this being networking at all. It was more of just for like our own hobby. And this ends up working because what happens is over time, these peers that you meet and these people who are originally beginners, they end up becoming industry leaders over time. So a lot of the people that I met 10 plus years ago, they're senior designers for teams or they own organizations. They have a lot of experience. So you gain experience while they gain experience, and you build a network that way. So that's what ended up happening in my case. Um, and it's more of a risk because it's long term and you don't know how it's going to end up. But sometimes it just ends up working out. But I think the thing that is maybe more useful is the value method. So this is a shorter term investment, and what you do is you offer value to other people through experience or services, and you don't need to have as much growth. You can jump straight into the industry this way. What I ended up doing in my case for experience, um, so I went to university, I got a formal education in design, and that carried over to my career because in esports and gaming, I knew that people don't usually have a formal education in design. So there's a lot of things that people didn't know about graphic design that I learned through university. So that was the value that I brought in. I paid money to get a formal education. I'm going to use that to my advantage. And I started making content that was based around teaching people. And I made educational content on YouTube and TikTok. And like I was teaching people graphic design, teaching people how to design in esports and how to design intentionally. And in doing that, I was able to put value out that helped me build a following and helped me meet other people. So I was able to make a network just based on that value that I was putting out. And another thing you can do is services. So I have a great example with someone who reached out to me and they offered to edit my videos, but they offered it in a way that was like, um, how would I put it? So they reached out to me. They saw that I was making content. They saw I was making YouTube videos and I was teaching people. And they told me, like, hey, I really like the content you're making. I think it's really helpful to the community. Here's something that I noticed that you're not doing. I want to try to edit this video for you. The context is that I was doing live streams but I wasn't using the videos from that live stream. So he offered, he's like, hey, I want to cut up this live stream. I think there's a lot of great content in it. I'm going to make this video for you. And I'm just going to show you like a cut down version of your streams and I'll send it off to you because I think there's content there that people are missing out on. And it was something that I initially hadn't thought of doing. And he was able to provide value to me that I originally hadn't thought of. So I think one problem that people have when they reach out is their way of networking is they offer to just do free work. And they're like, hey, I'll just design this for you. Like, I'll make your new logo. And that to them is their form of networking. But a lot of the times, that person maybe doesn't need that service. So you're kind of just throwing yourself like, I'm just going to work for this person. I don't know if they need it or not, but I'm going to do that in hopes that they make a connection with me. And if they don't end up needing the work, you end up wasting your time. It's free. And if they don't need that work in the first place, it's not going to be a strong connection, right? But that person stood out to me because they offered to solve a problem that I didn't know existed in what I was doing. And they were able to create value for my brand. And I stay in touch with this person now. And if they need or if I need stuff done, I'll reach out to them. So that was like a free connection that they got. I just took a little bit of their time and a little bit of research. Like, yeah, I felt like this person they understood my brand really well to be able to make that decision for me. So this is a value method. Takes a little bit of research and investment of like how you can get creative, but it takes a lot less time. And if you do it right, you can connect with an industry leader just immediately, right? If you do it right. So that's what I have on networking. Personal branding. Also, how can I see how much time? I want to make sure I'm not rambling too much. I have an hour. Okay, cool. So personal branding, another skill that is really useful. I don't know what you guys do in the program now, but I found that personal branding can be a lot more than being just decorative for a designer. So the ways that you do your personal branding and the function of personal branding, it can be really, really useful for you. So my advice is to be your own client and to avoid doing decorative design and to evolve over time. So going through these one at a time. When it comes to being your own client, one thing that I say is that we think we know who we are, so we skip a lot of the steps. I know a lot of designers, they have a hard time coming up with their own logo. And the reason for that I found is because you just kind of assume like, okay, I've known myself my whole life. I don't really need to research. Like, I'm going to just get straight into the sketches and the logo design, and I'll just see what I come up with. And people have a hard time coming up with their own logo because, similar to a client, if you skip all of those steps at the beginning, you're going to run into a lot of roadblocks. So you treat yourself as your own client. When I was working on my personal branding, I just pretended like I knew nothing about myself. And I started from step one on like who like what's my background, who's my audience, why am I doing this, like what is this brand, who's it going to reach out to, and why do I even need a personal brand in the first place. And you just start from there, right? Doing non-decorative design, I think, is really important for your personal brand. A lot of people will just make themselves a logo and just so they have one. but it's important that your personal brand, similar to if you were a client, has a specific purpose or function. A lot of cases, it's connecting you with your audience. So if you're doing a logo for yourself, you need to know who your audience is first, because if you do something like streetwear, that's gonna, and like you want clients that are in the streetwear industry, your logo should reflect that audience. It should connect with that audience. In my case, my personal brand, I already knew was going to be focused on education. So I created an identity that utilized a lot of typography, and I made it in black and white because I knew I would have to make like presentations like this. I was able to make this really fast because I'm not focused on color. I just need to get information out, right? So that's the function of my personal brand. And it all goes back to what I said at the beginning with context. When you think about the context of where your brand is going to go and how it's going to be used, that's what ended up being useful for me, right? So similar to a client, you don't want to do decorative design. It should have some type of solution or objective. And I think evolving a design is really, really important. When you do a personal brand and you make your own logo, it's very easy to just leave it as it is and never touch it again because you put in the work and this is your logo. But I think it's safe to admit if you make mistakes or you don't really understand the circumstances that'll change over time. So let's say you do a streetwear logo for your brand because you want to connect to that audience, and maybe over the years the industry changes, right? So streetwear changes, the audience shifts a little bit, so you have to be able to adapt your brand to fit those changes. And in my case, I made a mistake with my personal brand when it came to YouTube and content because I didn't initially think about all of the details that go into like YouTube, where you need to make the brand stand out a little bit more and be more like clickable. um, Originally my content was made to be for like Twitter, where it's more of like a blog, information, slides. And when I moved into YouTube, you need to make stuff like bubbly and super bold and in people's face because you're competing with other people on the platform. So I had to change my brand to fit for YouTube, right? So that was a mistake on my part that I didn't really consider. But if you're able to recognize those mistakes, you can change the design based on that situation, right? Um, Job hunting. So, general advice for those of you trying to get a job in design. Uh, I think the most important things is being able to solve problems, create opportunities, and adding value. So, to get into these more specifically, um, being able to solve a problem is the reason that you're going to be hired, right? So I've been talking about non-decorative work throughout the deck, but when you think about being hired as a designer, in my case, my goal isn't to make visuals, it's to get engagement because I work in marketing. My designs are meant to get more eyes on them. So my metric for that is my design should get more views. That's the reason why they're hiring me, is because I'm solving that problem that, let's say, their graphics, they're not getting enough people to click on it, or not enough people are interested in the information that's being presented. So my focus now is not how do I make these engaging visuals. It's how do I get these visuals, um, how do I get people to click on them and look at them more, right? And that changes how you approach that design, um, and it changes your objective, right? Creating opportunities. So this is one of my favorite situations that I was able to kind of like push in my own career, is being able to create opportunities that weren't originally there. So when I worked at 100 Thieves, I was originally a graphic designer, but I noticed that there was a gap in that not a lot of people were doing motion design in the team. So there was almost no animation. The content team was too focused on like shooting and creating, like filming the video itself. They didn't have anyone that was dedicated to making motion graphics. So I decided to fill that gap, and I showed them like, hey, I'm going to start animating some of these graphics and we're just going to see how it does. And we're able to use the metric that I listed out where like I want more engagement. My focus as a designer is to get people to look at this content more. And we were able to compare the numbers and say like, okay, motion graphics, our numbers are a lot higher for these graphics than they are when they're just static, right? And that would not have existed if I didn't bring it up because they initially thought that they didn't need a motion designer, but you're able to bring that in. And I love doing animation. So it's a way for me to bring in my own perspective, my own interest into that job. And it adds more value to, that organization. Um, so that being said, the other points kind of touch on the same thing. So being able to innovate for your clients don't know everything. A lot of the times they don't know exactly what they want. So it's your job to guide them through that. And you have all of these perspectives and experiences that you'll learn through university and that you learn through your own career as a designer. Your goal is to bring those perspectives in and show it to the client because they haven't experienced the same things that you have, right? And you're able to bring up a lot of new opportunities when you approach things that way, right? So adding value kind of goes on what we were talking about. So being able to measure success. One thing that I think is really useful for how you add value to the clients you work with is you work with them and not for them. So a lot of people will see design as like, okay, the client is hiring me to make this graphic. I'm going to make it for them and send it off and hope that they're happy with it. And what is more valuable to the client is not that you just hand them what they're asking for, but you work with them to make sure that that's the right thing for them, right? So when I did my freelance stuff with Paper Crowns, the way I approached all my client projects is I would treat our meetings more as like a workshop. So instead of me presenting a logo to them and saying like, hey, here's my logo, this is what you asked for, like, do you like it, do you not like it, like, let's approve it and move on. Uh, I would specifically like lay out, here's the research we put in. This is what I came up with this information. Let's break it down. Like, are there any concerns we have? Do we feel like this is hitting the audience? So like any nervousness that they have or any questions that they might come up with, I want to tackle it in the moment. So we don't move 3 steps into the process and then suddenly they're like, actually, I'm thinking about it. I actually don't think this makes sense for our audience. Like I put some thought into it. I don't think it works. So I workshop that in the moment, right? Throughout the slides, like, hey, do we have any questions about this? Like, is this is the research that I have? Does this research make sense? Does this still uh, add up to like what the client knows? And I'll clear that up early on, right? And being able to do that is another way for you to add value for the work that you put in because you're not just creating these graphics, you're helping the client. You're basically consulting, which has value in itself, right? And speaking of that, self-value, this is the last section that I wanted to add. It's pretty straightforward, but being able to evaluate your worth, charging more and adding more time to your deadlines. I just wanted to, based on my experience, touch on each of these. So being able to evaluate your worth is really, really important. And in that, being able to value yourself. I think this is probably more subjective, but figuring out what's worth your time and being able to say no to projects is really important. And on the other hand, being able to evaluate your worth to other people. So I think a good example of this is the clients that you work with. Your value to them is going to be different each time based on who they are. So a mom and pop shop, like a local store that needs a logo for their brand, uh, is going to be worth less than if Nike reached out to you because they need a design for their apparel, right? One of them is going to bring in more revenue, so it has higher value than if you were doing like a local shop. They're not going to bring in as much money, right? And that affects how much you charge for your work, right? And I think in that a lot of people, they'll try to charge per hour. So they'll have like an hourly rate for when they design, but hourly rate doesn't work because for a local store, if you charge $1,000 an hour for a logo, that's not going to work for them because they're not going to get that money back from the work that you put in. Nike, it's probably fine, right? Like they're going to get the money back for it and they'll make a profit. So that's fine for them. But even though you're putting in the same amount of work, the value is going to be different for both of those clients. Um, so being able to value yourself um, and say no to projects, like you're going to have to turn down some local clients if you realize that like the value that they're going to get from it isn't enough to cover what you charge. Um, and that's going to help you a lot with being able to say no and yes to the right clients. And being able to evaluate your worth is going to be based on your own experiences and your own strengths. So, going to university, you're taking in all this information, you're learning all these new things. So, that in itself has value. Your ability to consult the client in the right direction, tell them what's the right and wrong way to go with their design, like that all has value and that goes into your worth, right? So I'm always encouraging people that they're not charging for like the design they're doing, they're charging for all of it, right? For being able to think through problems, for how efficient you are, that all has value and that increases your self-worth, right? Um, so these are all just things to think about, but otherwise, charge more money for what a lot of people undercharge. So this should go up with experience. Um, so when you do your self-evaluation for how much you think you're worth, it should keep going up with time because you're gaining more experience and knowledge. So even though you're producing the same exact work, the knowledge you have to be able to do it quicker makes it worth more money, right? Even if you're doing the exact same logo, right? Um, One thing for client work, I think people when they don't charge more, they charge the same amount and it doesn't go up as they gain experience. You start to get more client requests because your value is going up, but you're not charging more. And you run into an issue where you'll get 10 clients because all of them want to work with you. And it's super stressful. You have to work with a bunch of people all at once. But how it should be is you should prefer to go towards having one big client than 10 small clients. I would rather triple my prices and have only one person reach out to me that is willing to pay that than work for three individual clients and stress myself out. Putting in triple the hours for something that I could get paid the exact same amount for, right? So this is why when you gain experience, you have to be very thoughtful about how much you're learning and how much you're improving and adjust your prices based on that, right? Um, so yeah, that being said, uh, recognizing the size of the client that you work with is also super important. When we're talking about big clients and small clients, I would rather work with like one Nike than 10 local clients. And that's because I'm going to get more value working with them. So charge more and add more time to your deadlines. Uh, super underrated. A lot of people, they will bite off more than they can chew. And as a general rule of thumb that I wanted to end off on is if you have a deadline, if you think it can get done in a week, say that it's going to take 2 weeks. You know, uh, there's so many situations as a freelancer, especially when you're on your own schedule and you're making your own time, where you want to prove to them that like you're efficient and you can get the work done, and you end up taking 5 projects and you're like, okay, I can do all this in a week. You know, if I work nonstop and I put in the hours, like I can get all of this done, right? And you end up being 2 weeks late on the project, and it is a great way to show that you're an amateur in managing your own time, right? Uh, the client, I promise, would rather that you take longer and deliver on the deadline every single time than the client not knowing if you're going to be on time or if you're overestimating or underestimating. It would be much safer to just assume it's going to take this exact amount of time. So just double your deadlines, give yourself time to explore the project. If you make your deadlines the exact amount of time that you think it'll take to finish, then if you're creating a design and let's say you branch off into something that's like, this direction looks really exciting, but I didn't give myself enough time to explore it, then you've just cut off an option that could have potentially been the right solution. So you give yourself more time to explore so that you can find things that you initially would not have thought of when you were coming up with the deadline, right? But other than that, I think that's everything. I've been talking for a minute about a lot of stuff, and I'm still jet lagged because I just got into the US like a couple days ago. But you can find me at Nowack Design anywhere. I teach a lot of this content in a lot shorter videos too. So if this is a long presentation, I have 6-minute videos that cover a lot of this stuff. So you can find me on any of these things. And like I said at the beginning, a lot of this is very situational advice. So I want to understand your guys' situations. And if you have any questions, let me know. I don't know how much time I have, but
we have like 40 minutes, but
okay.
So we have a few questions on Zoom.
Okay.
So one person said, "Thank you for sharing your advice so far. My name is Valentina, and I'm a senior in the design program." She's also the co-president.
Oh, cool.
And she asked, "Are there any general career resources or job boards you recommend for those seeking employment in esports industry?"
Oh yeah, esports, Twitter, just Twitter. That's the only thing you need. You don't need LinkedIn, but you can get it if you want. Everything happens on Twitter. It's like when people reach out to me on how they get involved in esports, and I ask if they have a Twitter and they say no, it's everything happens on there. So get a Twitter. It's the only resource you need. And then a Behance, because that's generally what everyone in the esports community uses for their portfolio because it's free. And yeah, those two things, definitely.
Cool. And then she had another question. She said, "I'm also hoping to pursue motion design, and it's super inspiring to see your motion design work. In Professor Kelly's class, we will do a motion design module this year. What approach do you recommend for beginners?"
Well, I'm hoping she said she was going to reach out to me to help like do a lesson for that class. And I would really like to do that. But for beginners, the biggest piece of advice I have for motion graphics is focus on the graphic design first. So if you're a good graphic designer, you can make good motion graphics. And motion graphics don't need to be complicated. A lot of this stuff, maybe I can go to the beginning. Like 90% of what I do is not using like really complicated effects. It's just scale, position. So like the bottom right design, it's just doing like it's just moving the shapes, right? So it's just an effect called trim paths. It's really easy to use, but other than that, it's just hierarchy, positioning, contrast. Like it's all the same stuff you learn as a graphic designer. You just apply it into like more frames, right? So I guess one way that I would put it is like if you can design one frame, focus on that first. Like focus on getting a good frame and then animate it afterwards, right? But if you're a beginner, you start off with the basics and just apply your graphic design knowledge into that. Yeah.
How did you sort of get into motion design? Did you get into that before you entered into the program, or was it you discovered that while you were in it or after?
I started with I would like edit montages. That's how I got into gaming. So I did that for free. I did like Call of Duty montages, and that's how I learned After Effects. And on the side, I was learning graphic design in high school. And what ended up happening is I knew I wanted to go to college for design. I knew that like Sac State had a graphic design program, and I had been slowly like self-teaching After Effects to myself. So eventually the two just kind of came together and I just applied After Effects into graphic design and I started making animations. But I didn't start doing motion graphics till college. Um, but that's just kind of how it ended up working out. I initially wanted to use it as a way to like be like another skill, you know? So like I had a lot of things that I would make as a designer that I'm like, man, I wish this could move, you know? So it just became like another resource for me. Um, but I've ended up loving it so much. It's like 90% of my portfolio is motion graphics.
Those montages, did you do them for yourself? Or did you do them for, like, just people on?
Yeah, I did. I was not good enough at video games to like make my own montages, so I would just do them for other people, and I did them for free. I actually I have a couple YouTube videos that are like super cringy where I'm like basically like begging people on YouTube for me to like edit their montages for them. Like I don't need any money, like just message me and like we'll work something out, you know? Um, but I ended up doing it for individual people and then I started doing it for organizations and then like larger content creators and then larger organizations and it just kind of like snowballed. Yeah. It's a long time ago.
What applications do you use for motion design?
After Effects, and I'm learning Cinema 4D again, but that's just for 3D stuff. You just need After Effects. Um, I don't think there's anything else I really use for motion graphics. I don't do like hand-drawn animation, but I think Adobe Animate lets you do like hand-drawn stuff. But After Effects, it's like the industry standard. Like you'll be fine with just that.
Do you storyboard stuff out like prior, like for sketches or anything?
For some of the larger projects, yes. But also a lot of the larger projects I'll work on with a team. It kind of depends on the situation. So like when I did stuff for Riot for Valorant, they already kind of knew what like how they wanted it to look. So we would just kind of fill in the blanks and do it that way. Sometimes for like intro sequences, I don't need a storyboard because it's just one, you know, like it's just their logo. Um, but yeah, I don't do it as much as I should because I know you have to storyboard and sketch a lot at university, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I'm not asking.
You said you're good at Cinema 4D and you primarily use After Effects. Do you use After Effects also for your content, or do you use something like Move or Premiere for that sort of stuff?
No, I do everything in After Effects. At least the way my job is, because like for my job at 100 Thieves, I was kind of saying like I do a lot of static graphics, and then I discovered later like, how about we like why don't we animate these, right? So I would just have the Photoshop file and I would just import it into After Effects, and that's like everything that I need, right? So it could change based on like the things that I learn, but because I started with After Effects and it hasn't like I've never had an issue that I'm like I need another software to execute on this idea. I've just kind of like stuck with it, you know. But it's nice because Adobe is compatible with Adobe. So when you use After Effects, it's like your Illustrator, like your vector files, you can just import them in, or like you can just import an entire Photoshop document and it has all the layers like already organized for you, you know, like it just makes it easy, right? Yeah.
Do you like for your like line of work? Do you what other branches do you like, sort of work with? Like marketing, for videographers, like, into like what extent?
Yeah. So that was a surprise for me when I started working with a single company is initially I worked in marketing, but because design is used throughout the company, I would work with basically every branch. So like if the content team needed something like an intro sequence or they just needed like, you know, like the content team or editors, they don't have like design experience. So a lot of the times they'll know like they'll have a good sense of flow for the video, but it'll just like look really shitty. So I'll be like, can you just like design like the lower thirds so they look nice, you know? And then I did a lot of stuff for partnerships too. So like internal, making like pitch decks look pretty, or like a lot of the times it's like, hey, can you put this logo of this brand that we want to reach out to on a t-shirt and like a building, and you end up working with basically everything. I've done like internal documents, like handbooks and like holiday parties, you know, making designs. So you just end up like, from my experience, you just get thrown around everywhere, wherever they need stuff to like look pretty, right? Yeah.
How closely do you have to stick to like this sort of style guys? Like, do we give you like a little bit more freedom? Because I work for Zach State, we're always
That okay, so that's what's nice about gaming and working in the esports industry, is nothing is really like set in yet,
Yeah.
because esports has been around for like a decade or two. Like it really, there isn't a brand out there that is that strict about like it needs to be this way, because people are always innovating. And that's kind of why I always push for research, because there are situations like for 100 Thieves, I was able to push rebrand with my senior designer, and we were able to pitch it to the entire team because we had designed things for a very specific, like we've designed it a certain way for a really long time since 100 Thieves started. Like it's always looked this way. And we came into it a few years later, like, hey, our audience has changed. This is like, this this style doesn't work anymore, you know? And because we were able to showcase like how the industry is now versus how it was back then, and we were able to make like a genuine pitch for that, like we were able to just do like rebrand the team. So that was like a big project we worked on last year, was like, let's just like rebrand 100 Thieves and just make it look how we think it should look, you know? So it's more fun. You can't do that at Sac State. But if somebody was if Sac State genuinely had like a problem with its design, I'm sure if someone came in and they had like evidence to back up why their design is outdated, I'm sure they would. I mean, that's why big companies rebrand all the time, because someone comes in and they're like, this doesn't work anymore, you know? So, yeah.
You go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, so
What's up?
when you're talking about rebranding, going off that, what do you look at when you decide like, hey, this is like, isn't working exactly, to decide to go with a new brand?
Yeah, it's usually like 90% of the time it's the audience shifts. So what we noticed for like 100 Thieves, for example, we did like this kind of techie, like minimalist typography style. And it worked for the time being, but you know, last year we looked at how our audience changed and we realized like 100 Thieves isn't really about gaming as much. It's mostly like culture and everything. Like our audience is a lot more real. We described kind of like raw as like one of our keywords, and we came up with a design style that had a little bit more emotion to it. And that was based off of like, okay, our fans like minimal and technical doesn't add up with the type of stuff that they like. Like most of them were involved with like street culture and like streetwear and stuff like that. So doing like a tech style doesn't really make sense for fans that enjoy that type of like product, you know? So that ended up changing how we approach the like the new design style, right? But it's mostly audience. Sometimes it's products like Dunkin' Donuts. They rebranded because they didn't want to be known as like donuts only. You know, they sold like other food. So they got rid of Dunkin' Donuts, you know? Yeah, now it's just Dunkin'. So sometimes it's functional too. Yeah.
And we have one more question on Zoom, and it is, how would you describe your workflow process creating motion graphics? Do you come up with a lot of sketches at the beginning? She said, I feel my execution might be limited if I can't find a YouTube video tutorial to
Yeah.
follow that matches my ideas. I feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll normally design the static frame first, and like you're saying, like a YouTube video, like to get like the exact effect that you're looking for. Um, I'll think about that in advance. So I'll come up with the design style. Like I wonder if I can pull up like use one of these as an example. But like I guess like the top right, he wanted it to look kind of like how would you even describe this, like warfare style the
Oh, that one.
Matthew Beam one. Yeah. Um, so I wanted it to look like really like techie and a lot of HUD elements. And I thought about that in advance of like what type of stuff would I need. Um, but that's why I really push for motion graphics. Like you don't need to make things really complicated because I understood like the style and the keywords to make it look like tech. But if you look at the individual effects, like one by one, a lot of it's just like scale or like the text appears and disappears and like there's a lot of zooms. But if you break it down, the effects themselves are like really simple. It's just you think in advance of like how they're all going to come together. And for motion graphics, I always try to come up with like keywords. So I'll do 3 keywords in advance before I even get into the design on like what's the tone of this project going to feel like, you know? So is it going to be like industrial? Is it aggressive, elegant? Um, and you can kind of I think you learned this in university already, but if you have a keyword like I want this brand to be elegant, you can already start thinking of effects that would feel elegant, you know. So maybe something that's a little bit slower using curved lines. So you think about like, okay, how would I animate curved lines? Maybe you do like a trim paths effect where it kind of like how would I describe it? I don't really know how to describe the effects themselves, but you think about you go off of those keywords and then you build on potential effects that you could use to animate. That way you don't have to like think of a specific tutorial. You're going off of like a phrase instead. Right.
Where do you find this your inspiration? Where do you, that's what I do when I'm design.
Mhm.
I just type in like post design
Mhm.
and
For design inspiration, I usually base it off of I mean, I get most of it from like Pinterest, Behance, Dribble, like those are like generic websites, but like per project, like I said, I always come up with like the keywords. So I'll come up with some general phrases to go off of for the tone, and then I'll search for inspiration based off of those keywords. And you practice it in university too, but like when I do my mood boards, I always try to pull images and animations that are from different places, you know? So some are like just historical imagery or like, hey, what's up, Marco? Hey. But I want to make sure every image in the mood board is like coming from a different place. So it doesn't just feel like it's all like very narrow and like where you found the inspiration. Just in esports specifically, I noticed that a lot of people in esports, they'll find inspiration in esports. So like through other organizations, they'll say like, oh, this team is doing this. This looks super sick. Or like someone just posted this on Twitter, like this match graphic looks really cool. But what we did with 100 Thieves is we got inspiration outside of gaming and we looked more into like street culture and I pulled in like Swiss typography and how we use typography in the brand and like those don't come from gaming, but we're able to integrate it in and that's how you make it more memorable because it doesn't just feel like everything else, right? Yeah.
When you say you translate things from Illustrator to After Effects, how do you like set up the document to make it easy to like play with on After Effects, like with layers or like figures,
I don't know the specific name of it, but you can save a file, like you can save the layers of a file in Illustrator, and it'll literally, like when you import it in After Effects, it'll just have like the exact same layers. And then if you're working with like a vector, like a path, you can literally just copy the path, like just highlight all the paths, copy it, and you can just paste it into like a shape in After Effects, and it'll copy all the points over to it. But I know there's, I don't remember specifically what it's called, but I know there's like a feature where you just save layers and you put it into After Effects and it has all the layers.
So then is it
Yeah.
good to like keep your layers like simple and stuff and like organized?
They have to be really organized because it only translates it if each path is saved to its own layer. So you can't like, in Illustrator, you can like group, you can't have groups in your layers. Like they have to be just one
Oh, okay.
like
So
chunk.
no
Yeah.
groups.
Yeah, you can do groups, but you can't have groups inside your groups. Like those aren't gonna carry over. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
No subgroups.
Yeah, no subgroups. Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions?
What about you?
Oh, you know.
I'm doing good. I'm doing fantastic now that you're here. Let's go.
Well, what would be the best way to reach you if we have any like follow-up questions?
Hit me up on Twitter. Yeah. If there's anything I can do to help, or if you have any questions after this, reach out to me on Twitter and let me know that you're coming from Grids, and I will help you out. Okay.
What's the second?
If you don't have Twitter, a Discord's fine.
Yeah.
Discord. I'm in the Grids Discord, so you could just message me there. But yeah, if you need anything, let me know. So
Thank you so much for coming by.
thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
This is very cool. The digital presentation.
All right, wait, okay, yeah. Wait, when I'm in the meeting. Thank you, everybody who stopped by.
Thanks, y'all.
Appreciate it. I will see y'all later. Bye-bye. I'll end this. Bye.